The 80s had the General. The 90s had John Gilligan. In the noughties, it was the reign of Martin Marlowe Hyland. His was a familiar path with success and power, and then the recklessness. He had to go, because with him, an innocent young man doing an honest day's work died. Crime World presents Caught in the Crossfire, the unsolved murders of coke kingpin Marlowe Hyland and innocent Anthony Campbell. Available now on all podcast platforms.
It's heartbreaking to know the suffering that master when Katie trues. I can't imagine anyone could do such a thing. And Katie would have tried her hardest to fight back. She's not life. That having trial has left an overwhelming sense of injustice. What the fuck? We kept us going through it all. It was like he'd be in prison anytime soon. When you look back from the start, that was never going to happen. I spent months imagining the different ways that I could have saved Katie. It's heartbreaking to know we'll never see Katie smile again. Katie's passion for horses, fearless talent, and her love for her family and friends, and her laugh will be the memories that we would keep. Working with horses was Katie's dream career, and she is really good at it. Was that morning Katie was getting up to go to work like she did every morning. She worked so hard. We were so proud to call her our daughter, our granddaughter, sister, auntie, niece, cousin, friend, and work colleague. I would like to say a thank you to all the people, organisations who went to the police to say this does not look right to be deemed suicide, especially Paul Lipsick. And I'd like to thank all the family liaison officers, especially Olivia and Tamsin, for Mark and James, who got this case going. We worked hard to get it this far. I would like to say thank you also to all the supportive messages, to all the prayers over the last 4 years. A crew's bereavement, victims' support.
Ciaran, let's start with the three women in the dock and what sentences they got today in relation to their role in covering up actions of Jonathan Cresswell, who, of course, was facing trial for murdering Katie Simpson, but died as his trial got underway.
Yeah. So we had three women in court today. We had Hayley Robb, who had pleaded guilty to withholding information and 2 counts of perverting justice. So that she had been given, Creswell had told her about the assault on Katie the night before that she died. And then Hayley Robb had also helped clean up blood at the house where Katie died and also took Creswell's clothes to be washed. So those were the charges that she faced. She was given a sentence of 2 years, but it was suspended for 2 years.
And Ciaran, of course, and the judge pointed out that that was all done in the belief that Katie Simpson had committed suicide and that Jonathan Cresswell didn't want it getting out that he had assaulted her in advance of that.
Yeah, and that was, he said that the central theme with the three women that were in court today, Hayley Robb, Jill Robinson and Rose de Montmorency Wright, the three of them, Judge Neil Rafferty said that the central theme within all those cases that they helped Creswell cover up. But the cover up, as far as they were concerned, was in relation to the attack on Katie the day before she died. There was no sense, there was no indication, it was accepted that they clearly didn't know that Creswell had killed Katie, and that their role in this cover up was in relation to the attack. Creswell had told 2 of the women that he had given Katie, in his words, a hiding the day before she died, and they knew this, but didn't tell police when they spoke to police as part of the investigation and the initial investigation into Katie's death.
Now, Jill Robinson was the second woman, and she had given a statement to the police after Hayley Robb. She was kind of the first one to come forward and start maybe telling the truth.
Yeah, she was convicted of perverting the court of justice by helping wash his clothes. It was Hayley Robb had taken the clothes. Hayley Robb was given the clothes by Creswell and told to go and get them washed. Robb went to the house of Jill Robinson's, and the two ladies then went on and washed the clothes in one of those public laundrettes in a village in Tyrone. So Robinson was, as I said, pleaded guilty to that charge. She was sentenced to 16 months today, and that again was suspended for 2 years. And the third defendant, Rose de Montmorency Wright, she had pleaded guilty to withholding information about the attack on Katie. She was sentenced to 8 months, and that also was suspended for 2 years.
Now, at the sentencing today, the judge pretty much opened with some of the victim impact statements, or the statements that the family of Katie Simpson had given. And I thought in particular a standout bit for me was her mother, Nolene, had given a statement of kind of not being able to comfort her daughter as she died and not being able to reassure her, because as her daughter drew her last breath in the hospital, of course she was brought to the hospital by Creswell, who claimed that he had found her hanging on a strap and had taken her down, had tried to revive her on the way to the hospital. But she's there and she survived some days after arriving. But her mother said that she couldn't comfort her daughter. She couldn't tell her it was okay because she thought that she'd taken her own life. And of course, while it wasn't actually mentioned by the judge, we do know that Creswell was there in the hospital room with her.
So that was standard procedure in cases like this, where the court will receive victim impact statements from family and friends of the deceased to, highlight the impact that their death has had. And as you say, there was quite a few statements put into the court from Katie's family and friends. Her mother speaks about, which she directly comments on the three women, the allegations of the three women who were in court today. And she says that she was, as a mother, she sat with Katie in the hospital after what at that time was a perceived suicide. And she said, obviously, as a mother, it was incredibly painful for her to see Katie in that state. But she says, if any of those girls, referring to the three women who were in court, had been truthful about what they knew at that time in terms of the attack the day before, or just maybe days before, on Katie, that she, as Katie's mother said, would have been much better able to comfort her daughter because they would have known what happened to her. And she obviously then says that if she had known what had happened, Creswell wouldn't have been near Katie's bedside. Creswell maintained this fiction in the aftermath of Katie's death, and he was at the hospital. And by all accounts, he played a leading role in Katie's funeral.
Terrifying sort of images of all that.
Yeah. So Katie's mother, obviously, now reflecting back on that, of course, she wouldn't have had Creswell anywhere near her daughter, and at least it would have been in a cell somewhere. But so that her impact statement's very highlights her pain, and there was also statements from Katie's two sisters and her younger brother and her parent or grandparents, all her relatives and her friend, just all talking about how devastating and what happened and the impact it's had on their lives and the void that Katie's death has left in their lives. She was obviously a much loved young woman, very popular both in terms of her own family and her friends, loved horses and had so much going for her and such a bright future ahead. And this was all taken from her by Creswell, who had obviously this level of control.
Mm-hmm. They talked about a fun girl, a kind girl, much loved friend, a much loved aunt who was, looking forward to seeing her niece, join her in her love for horse riding, who was somebody who, had she lived in 2 weeks, would have become an aunt for maybe the third time, because I think another sister of hers was due a baby very close to the time it happened. And the grandparents described her and talked about her playing around the house. Seemed all a very normal, ordinary childhood, one that indeed was very much obsessed with that sort of horse world, where she had great success as a show jumper and seemed to have a great skill and talent. So just bring us back, I suppose, before we go any further with this sentencing, to exactly what happened. And Katie, I think, was only 21 when she lost her life.
Yeah, so this tragic story goes all the way back to August 2020. August the 3rd, 2020, Katie was taken to hospital from her home just outside Derry. She was taken by Creswell in the car to hospital, a short distance to Alton Hospital, and he claimed that he had found Katie hanging from the banister in her home. Katie shared the house with Creswell and Creswell's partner, Katie's sister Christina and Creswell's 2 children. So they lived in the house together. So that morning, Creswell claimed that he had come back to the house after leaving his children off to his mother's house and found Katie hanging from the banisters. He took her down, he claimed, put her in a car and drove her then to the hospital. So what is generally now regarded as a very poor police investigation, they looked into this and they essentially accepted Creswell's story that Katie had taken her own life. And for all intents and purposes, the case was closed. But there were members of Katie's families and her friends, didn't accept this, and they believed there was more to it. It later turned out that Creswell had a record. He served time in jail for an attack, a brutal assault on a previous partner. And this was well known. It was covered obviously in the press, and his friends and Katie's family knew about this attack, which had happened several years beforehand. So essentially, people weren't happy with the police investigation and acceptance that Katie had taken her own life. So the pressure came on the PSNI from different sources. And then I think it was just at the beginning of 2021, they launched a murder investigation into Katie's death, which resulted in Creswell being charged with her rape and murder. And after quite a lengthy court hearings and as often happens in these cases, it was fairly protracted. It was eventually in April of this year, Creswell's murder trial got underway in Korean. On the first day of the trial, there was a general outline of the case, and it was said that Creswell was involved in an illicit sexual relationship with Katie and had been kind of a coercive control on her since she was a child. And that had continued on into her adulthood, and he was accused of murdering her out of jealousy because he had found out that she had started a new relationship. So the trial got underway in April, as I said, this year, but just the morning after the first day of the trial, Creswell's body was found at his bail address in Derry. Police said there was no suspicious circumstances around his death, so it's generally accepted that he had taken his own life. And this led to the ending of the murder trial against Creswell. And today's court hearing involved the 3 women who had admitted offences in relation to helping him cover up what happened. So they were today's sentenced. So in some ways that was not closure, but it's possibly, as far as the criminal system, a criminal is going to go in this case, because obviously the man who is generally held to have killed Katie never faced justice.
And it was certainly, in what has emerged over the past few months maybe and over the years, is the fact that Creswell had spun this very tangled web, which is still being untangled, but in that web were these three women. And the judge spoke about each one of them and their circumstances, I suppose, starting with Hayley Robb.
Yeah, she had been, it was came out in court that she was 17 when she first met Creswell, again through that equestrian kind of community, which is where all this tragic stories kind of revolves around. So Hayley Robb had met him when he was 17. They started a relationship, but she described how his coercive control. She was frightened of him. She had attacked her a number of times. On one occasion, she ended up in hospital with what was described as a clot on her chest. So she said that she, such a volatile character, that she never knew what was coming with him. So she was involved in this relationship with Creswell, and her defence clearly argued that this was the reason why she had covered up him. She was afraid of him, afraid of what he might do, and he had this level of control over her, which was one of what we've learned was quite a few women. He had this kind of control over another one being Jill Robinson, who was also in court today. She is 42, and she had been in a relationship for quite a number of years with Creswell, and again, described it as a violent relationship. He had attacked her again a number of times, and also, again, that she said that she was frightened of him, and to the extent that it was said in court that often domestic violence victims are so caught up in the control of their attacker that they deny that they've ever been attacked if questioned. And it came out that during question in relation to Katie's death, police put it to Jill Robinson that they had clear evidence that Creswell had attacked her in the past, but she denied this. So again, that played into that, where the victims are so controlled and so under the influence of the person that they actually deny that the attacks have even happened.
Yeah.
So that so the two of the women in court today had been in relationships with Creswell. The third, Rose de Montmorency Wright, she had got to know Creswell again through the question circle. She's only 23, and that when she was a teenager, she had started working for Creswell, and it led to then she actually lived in the house as well with Katie and Creswell and his partner, because it was through her working with Creswell that she had ended up living in the same house with him.
And I suppose it's interesting to go back and look at sort of the Hayley Robb. So she's 30 now when she's standing in the dock receiving this suspended sentence. She was 17 when she met him, which is 13 years ago. At that point in time, the judge said she was doing very well academically. She had been, she had a sort of bright future. She kind of she kind of gave up any ambition, I think, to study, and just started working full-time in the horse industry, and initially was working sort of for free in a yard that was owned by Creswell's family. Now, he at that point would have been in a relationship with Christina. They went on to have a number of children together. And I think Katie, my maths ain't great now, but I think Katie would have been coming up to about 10 years of age, at which point he met Hayley Robb. And that is the age the judge sort of said in sentencing that Creswell began to almost groom her.
Yeah, this was evidence from a friend of Katie's, a childhood friend, that she said that Creswell had, in many ways, started his powerful control over Katie started when she was 10 years of age and continued for the rest of her life, her short life. That he had known her through, because he was Katie's sister's partner, but he seemed to have been the character that he was. He just wanted to control, and particularly it was highlighted about young women, in particular, that he wanted to control so many within his life through violence, a lot through violence, or through different forms of control. But it seems that violence was a regular thing, and the judge actually today took the unusual step himself that he was saying, although Creswell wasn't being sentenced today, but clearly he had a huge influence, a massive influence on what was happening in the court proceedings today. But Judge Neil Rafferty said that, somewhat unusually, he was going to speak about Creswell because he felt clearly he was such a key factor in these three ladies being in court today. And actually, Judge Rafferty said that only for Creswell, he didn't believe that these three women would ever be in court. They all came with clear records and good family upbringings, but by having the unfortunate occurrence of Creswell coming into their lives, that's what how they ended up in court. Judge Rafferty said that there was a significant number of women who had come forward as witnesses, who had been involved either in a relationship with Creswell or had known him in different circles, and they were prepared to testify against him at the trial. Clearly, we won't get to hear that evidence now because the trial didn't go ahead. But Judge Rafferty said that he highlighted, actually, I mentioned earlier about the previous attack on Creswell's former partner. She was Abigail Lyle, and Abigail had been one of those. She was willing to testify at the trial about the attack on her, and we can name her. Obviously, the others had anonymity, but Abigail she's following Creswell's death. She did an interview with the BBC in which she spoke about her relationship with Creswell and how violent it had been and how it had been a horrific experience. But she was going to be a witness at the trial,
and she would have been quite central because Abigail Lyle, by the way, was also, the judge did commend her for her courage in waiving her right to anonymity and speaking out the way she has. But it was in 2010 that he was jailed for 6 months after pleading guilty to assaulting his ex-partner, Miss Lyle, also a show jumper who I read there recently is actually going to the Olympics in July, which is a fantastic achievement, and wishing her the best. But going back to that snapshot in time when he meets Hayley Robb, which would have been in around 2011, that is all happening there with him. He has been accused and has pleaded guilty to this assault on Abigail Lyle. He is, out of jail, presumably having served this sentence. People know about that and know what he's done, and he's coming into contact with a 17-year-old Hayley Robb, who obviously becomes quite obsessed with him, and they begin a sexual relationship. Jill Robinson is there in the background. Whether that relationship is continuing at the same time, it certainly did for a period. He's living or beginning a relationship with Nina Creswell, and has set his sights on young Katie, 10 years of age, coming to light as a talented show jumper. And that's kind of just what we know officially, and we don't really know what else was happening, but it's quite an amazing amount of people to be caught up in that web. He's obviously was a very powerful, influential person. And the judge said it was...
It's such an unusual and horrific story, obviously, but when you think back, all those... that timeline you're talking about there in those situations, but it wasn't a case of Creswell had been convicted of that crime and then moved elsewhere and started a new life. Everyone in that circle knew about the his jail sentence. It's been claimed that when he came out of jail, there was a welcome home party for him. There was, I think it was Hayley Robb had continued a relationship with him while he was in prison. So this was well known within the equestrian world, and those circles that they were all involved in. It wasn't a case of he was, gone somewhere and got a new identity and tried to hide his past. They knew about his past. They knew people knew what type of character he was, but it just appears to have been such a control and character that he soon fell into his similar ways. It wasn't just a case of one woman. As you said, he had a relationship with several women that we know of. Obviously, we would have heard a lot more if the trial had gone ahead.
And in sentencing the woman, the judge said that, had the trial gone ahead, or, had they been found guilty, that each of them, he expected, would have been convicted of the sentences of 2 years, I think 16 months and then 8 months respectively. But what was his reasoning in suspending those sentences?
Well, he spoke about their pleas of guilty, that they deserved significant credit for their pleas of guilty. They didn't plead. I think it was Hayley Robb had admitted her involvement in police at the end of 2003.
December, I think, 2023.
2023, sorry. And then the other two women had admitted earlier, I think, this year. So he said, Judge Rafferty said that they deserve credit for their pleas. They, as I mentioned before, they had clear records. They'd never been in court before. And then that element of that, they had been under the control of Creswell, and the fact that they weren't covering up a murder.
Yeah.
As far as they were concerned, it was an assault. That obviously, if they had told police the information that they had at the time, it clearly would have led to a police investigation straight away. And, instead it would have, the delay that happened, it was months before a murder investigation was underway, and obviously
he believed they were very low risk of reoffending any of the women. And I think Rose, he said, was working in some stables in the UK, and there was a letter sent from her employee that she was very valued, and that the employee knew all about the past and the sentence that she was facing, but that she was very valued member of staff. And the others too are sort of, I suppose, trying to get on with their lives. I think Hayley Robb, it was described that she suffered with her mental health in the aftermath of being approached by a member of the media in the run-up to this, and that she needed some help with that, but that she had sort of gone on to commit herself to physical exercise, had done a marathon or something, and had done that in aid of a charity.
The Belfast Marathon earlier on this year. And then the fact that it wasn't dealt with so much at today's sentencing, but at a previous hearing, Judge Rafferty, or the defence teams had also put forward that in many ways, obviously these ladies were convicted today of very serious offences, but in some ways they too are victims in this case, because they had been victims of Creswell as well, in terms of the control that he had over their lives for two of them. That included physical attacks. And the control that he had over them led to them letting themselves be involved in this, what was described as a conspiracy of silence. So I think that combination of the early pleas, their previous clear records, the character references that were brought forward for them, the low likelihood of further offending, as it was described, I think clearly those all played on the judge's decision to suspend the sentence as opposed to send them straight to jail.
So, Ciaran, what was the atmosphere like in court today, and did the women have support? Was there any commentary made outside the courtroom?
Well, there was a large group of Katie's relatives and friends at the court, and when they arrived at the court this morning, they put up posters outside the court. It was a picture of Katie on a horse and saying "Justice for Katie Simpson." In the court itself, the three defendants, they were along with some assume relatives. The three of them sat in the dock beside each other, alongside a female prison officer, and they just stared ahead. Basically, for the majority, the hearing lasted about 45 minutes. They just sat on the dock, stared ahead. To their left would have been quite a large group of Katie's family and friends. And when the charges, when they were sentenced, there wasn't much reaction from the three defendants, but a relative of Katie's stood up and described, didn't shout, but just you could clearly hear him say it was a disgrace.
Right.
Before he walked out of the court. And then after the sentencing, Katie's family, they went in off to a side room with the police liaison officers and the three defendants and their supporters fairly quickly left the court. There was obviously a significant media presence there, and after the short time, Katie's family and friends came outside and they spoke to the press outside. Katie's mother, Nolan, spoke to the press and clearly very upset at what had happened. It's obviously been a horrific experience for her and the rest of her family, but she described it as heartbreaking to know that Katie had suffered, and she described Creswell as a monster. She knows that Katie would have put up a good fight because she loved life so much. But clearly, as a mother, it's such a horrible thing to come to terms with. And they say, because of the trial not going ahead and following Cresswell's death, Katie Simpson said there's a feeling within their family, a real sense of injustice, that they didn't get to see Cresswell in court and ultimately jailed. I think that she says that sort of kept them going, that one day Katie would get justice and he would be behind bars. But she said, obviously that's never going to happen now. And just it was tough listening to mother's pain that, she talks about. She's always thinking of different ways she could have saved Katie, and, just that sort of, I suppose it would be torture for a family to know to have gone through that horrific experience, and that, but she wanted to speak to Katie, as they spoke about in their victim impact statements. The family, they were how much love Katie was and how proud they were of her. That clearly came through in the victim impact statements. But that sometimes that's on a bit of paper. But actually seeing Katie's mother speaking outside and the emotion in her voice and the support that she had got and how she spoke about Katie then through tears, it was very powerful, and it just brought it more out, about how big a loss have suffered.
Did she say anything in relation to these sentences today?
Not directly to the media, but even as I was leaving the courthouse, past some of Katie's relatives, and I spoke to one of them, and they clearly are not happy.
Yeah.
As I said, one of her relatives described it as a disgrace in the courthouse. Her family outside used even stronger language to me. But I suppose that's the next stage. If they could appeal the sentence if they wished. So we don't know, that may be something they do, but no, it's clear that they.
You mean they could agitate for the PPS to appeal the sentence if they so wish? Yeah. It was very comprehensively delivered and all explanations as regards why, and I think probably the judge maybe realised that sometimes it is hard for people, especially families of victims, to understand the sentence. But I thought he very carefully and painstakingly went through each point.
Yeah,
and
it was, as you said, clearly outlined, and I think obviously this case has very high profile, and with it has brought so much media attention. There was a couple of documentary teams there today have been following the case, and it's such an unusual and horrific case, all the circumstances around it. So it's clearly going to. It has done and will continue to get a lot of attention. It's just one of those stories. It's
no, undoubtedly, and I think people are going to start talking soon as the dust settles on all this. But for the moment only, I just wanted to finally ask you one thing. So Hayley Robb, Jill Robinson and Rose de Montmorency Wright are all in an unusual position. They've been sentenced. These sentences are suspended for 2 years. If they commit any crime punishable by jail within that time, these sentences will be immediately activated. Of course, the judge said they are unlikely to reoffend, but that's the position they're in. But where are they in a position, if they wanted to talk, to explain themselves in the north of Ireland? Are people who are essentially, they're still seen as serving a sentence? Have they got an ability to do that? Because they have been described in the court as well as victims, and they do have stories. I think particularly Hayley Robb, and she did that marathon for a domestic violence charity. Probably that maybe sends a message to us that maybe she's in a position that she has a story to tell. So where are they at, and can they speak to media? Or
well, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing stopping them. Clearly, there was various different restrictions in terms of reporting of this case, but now they've been convicted. As I said, I'm no legal expert, but I don't think there's anything to stop them speaking if they wish. Again, but on a different level, the court of public opinion is where it rests at the minute. They've obviously been found guilty of very serious offences in this terrible case, and the sympathy is with Katie's family and what they have gone through. So whether or not they would speak is one thing, but as far as I'm aware, that I don't think there's anything stopping them from it speaking. And again, as we've highlighted, they are victims as well, clearly nowhere near what Katie and her family have gone through, but that's part of the story, and it all kind of comes back to the same character of Creswell, who just, I think it kind of sums up, the judge today was saying he described him as a skilled and predatory abuser. And that kind of sums up this tragic story about the control and the suffering that he inflicted on Katie.
Yeah.
And these other women who were caught up in this tragic story as well, and they have got their, a sense, they have faced justice today, but ultimately it's one of those stories where the person most responsible has evaded justice, and that leaves a lack of closure in many ways, which I'd say sadly we haven't heard the end of that story by a long way.
Yeah. No doubt there will be inquests into both Katie Simpson's death and that of Jonathan Cresswell, and perhaps that'll be a forum where more of this information that would have come out during the trial will be aired. But I suppose for the meantime, Ciaran O'Neill, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.